This is another AD&D Toolkit tutorial video. I'm going to be talking today about armor. In regards to armor, a good rule of thumb that I tell new players when they're first creating a character and starting out is take the armor with the best armor class rating you can afford. You're going to get some starting gold. Everybody benefits from having a better armor class. And especially early on where you're squishy, take the best armor, like I said, that you can afford. That's the rule of thumb. There are a couple of other factors to consider, and we'll get into those in this video. But on page 36 of the player's handbook, here you're going to see the various types of armor and the armor class rating that they apply to the character. So first thing I guess that would be important to note for anybody coming particularly from future editions of Dungeons & Dragons is in AD&D, lower armor class rating is better. So armor class rating, they show you here, these armors range between 10 and 2. And 10 would be if you had nothing on but just some clothing. And then it goes down to wearing plate mail, which is full solid metal mail like a knight would wear. With a shield would give you armor class 2, and you can certainly get beneath 2 based upon dexterity adjustments if you're quicker to move and dodge attacks, or especially with magic, if you have a magic set of armor or a magic shield, or there's protection items that you can get, magical protection items, you can certainly get below 2, and players often do. You can even get down into the negatives, and the more negative the better, so -3 armor class is better than armor class -1. Alright, so that's how armor class works. One other thing that I do want to mention, because it is kind of counterintuitive, but in regards to that magical armor or protection items, so even though lower armor class is better, when you find a magical suit of armor, like let's say some chainmail, we're going to call that magical chainmail +1. But that +1 means it indicates a bonus of 1. You're actually subtracting it from the armor class, right? Because chainmail alone would give you an armor class of 5. Chainmail +1 would give you an armor class of 4. So again, you're subtracting that 1 rather than adding it. And they're not always consistent like that in first edition, where a plus is a bonus to armor class, because like in there's a table for, and actually I think it's really close here, so I could just, that might be this way, so I can zip over and show you. So there's a table for weapon versus armor type adjustments to hit adjustments. And so if the attacker is using one of these weapons, and then you find the armor class of the defender, this only applies to humanoids wearing some kind of actual physical armor. So if they are wearing armor, you would do these adjustments. Most DMs consider this optional. Most don't use it, other than if you're playing with AD&D Toolkit, because it makes it so much easier there. But otherwise, very tricky to work with this table. Not conceptually, it's not that hard to understand, but hard to implement. It takes a lot of time and numbers. And in any event, so on this table, they're showing you the armor class adjustment to make to the defender, and on this table, a +1 is not, it's actually a penalty, whereas like with magical armor, a +1 is a bonus. So like I said, they're not consistent the way they do things, and that's one of the big complaints everybody's ever had about first edition. But that's what we have. So I did want to point that out, because like I said, it is counterintuitive. I don't think I've said yet, but we are starting with first edition. That's what I generally play. I will touch upon second edition as well in this video. The way armor class works, the scale here and descending armor class being better applies to 2E also. Though they do have a couple of different armor types in second edition, and they certainly handle encumbrance and whatnot differently. So let's get to that now. Actually, before I do, no, yeah, I guess we'll just do that. So we're going to go over to here. This is actually the Dungeon Master's Guide, page 27. And then here, what we're looking at, in this table, they don't show you the armor class ratings, the AC, which you get from the PHB we were just looking at. I'm pretty sure there is a table for the armor class ratings in the appendices of the Dungeon Master's Guide, the very end. But this table is more about, you can see weight, bulk, base movement. All right, so base movement is 120 inches, or 12 inches actually. So it would be 120 feet or 120 yards, depending on the context. And so most players, let's deal with humans. A human with no armor, unencumbered, could move at 12 inches. If that same human, carrying nothing else, but was wearing chain, they would be limited to a max or base movement of 9 inches. Now this could even be, say, a human fighter who has 18.99 strength. Super strong. They can hold tons of weight. It's not the weight that's limiting this movement, it's the bulkiness of the armor. So if you're wearing chain, no matter what else you're carrying, you're starting out, best case scenario, 9 inches. And then that can be reduced based upon your weight and encumbrance. And so scale mail, for instance, pretty decent armor, better than ring as far as the armor class rating, but quite a bit heavier as far as the weight, and that base movement is reduced significantly. So it's a trade-off there. Do you get a little better protection? I think ring mail is armor class 7, scale will be armor class 6, so you get 1 improvement on the AC, but you're taking on quite a bit more weight, and you're significantly reducing the maximum movement rate here. So it is definitely a trade-off and something to consider. And you want to be aware of these base movement rates. Weight too, but really the maximum movement rate here, this is important to consider when you're picking out armor. Splint and banded mail are another example where they both afford AC of 4, but the splint is slightly heavier than the banded, and the big problem here is you got that weight reduction, or the movement reduction, from 9 inches to 6 inches. So definitely want to keep that in mind when picking out armor. And from there, I do want to head down briefly to magical armor. So in the DMG, page here, 164. So they do describe magical armor in shields. So magic armor has several bonuses, and they're all fantastic. One is the obvious. We talked about that earlier. Oh, and here they use chainmail as an example. Chainmail plus 1. So normal chainmail would give you an AC of 5, but you do 1 category better. It's a bonus to have a plus 1. So that's actually armor class 4 if you have magical chainmail armor plus 1. Another benefit is that plus 1 applies to saving throws, but only saving throws that are of a physical attack type. So if a magic user was to cast, say, a sleep spell on you, that magical chainmail does not apply to that saving throw. Actually, sleep doesn't get a saving throw, so it was a bad example, but let's say it did. Or like a suggestion spell. If you get a save against that, the magical chainmail armor would not apply to that saving throw. But if someone had a meteor swarm spell against you, that is a physical impact. Your armor could protect you against that, so being magical, that bonus would apply to the saving throw. And another huge benefit of magical armor in first edition is that it's weightless. Or I think they do say consider it like it's just clothing. Let me see if they actually, here we go, yeah. So all magical armor should be considered as being virtually weightless, equal to normal clothing. Let's assume a normal set of clothing, it's either 3 or 5 pounds. So that's a big deal. You're taking off 35, 40, 50 pounds of weight by having that magical suit. So huge bonus, going to allow you to carry a lot more equipment or loot. That'll bring me to shields. And why I'm saying that brought me to shields is because this weightlessness does not apply to shields. And I don't think it is actually spelled out expressly anywhere, but the pluses from a shield that apply to your armor class do not apply to saving throws. I think that only applies to armor. But shields generally will allow for +1, a bonus of 1 to your armor class. So if you're wearing normal chainmail, which is armor class 5, and you're wearing a shield, that's armor class 4. If we do go back to this equipment chart, I don't remember exactly where they tackle this. Yeah, here it is. Okay. So with shields, all shields are going to give you that +1 bonus to your armor class. Doesn't matter how small or big or if they're metal or wood. None of that matters. They're all +1. Where the differences lie is larger shields and metal shields are heavier. So you do have to take the weight into consideration. That's a negative, right? We want to lighten our load as much as we can. So you can carry all that fat loot back with you. But on the plus side, the larger the shield, the more attacks per round they protect you against. And so you'll see a small shield can be counted against only 1 attack per melee round, where a large shield can be counted against up to 3 attacks. So what happens is if you have some character and he's got a small shield on him and a group of kobolds is attacking him, if he's got a small shield, the first kobold to attack him, that same fighter who had chainmail, let's say, and he's got a small wooden shield. So he's got armor class 4. 5 from the chainmail, +1 for the shield is 4. Let's say there's no dex adjustments or anything else. So he's armor class 4 against the first kobold to attack him. The second, third, fourth, and so on kobolds that could attack him are now at armor class 5. That shield doesn't count. Conversely, with this large shield, kobolds 1, 2, and 3 would consider him an armor class of 4 because a large shield blocks up to 3 attacks. And then the fourth and so on after that, the shield would not apply. So those are really the only differences between the shields. The negative is the weight. Positive is you get more attacks that you can protect against. And like I said, magical shields do not get that weight reduction like magical armor does. Something else to consider with shields is that, and they discuss here, shields can be applied to the front. They cannot be, that their armor class bonus is not applied to the rear. Attacks from the right flank and rear, they show you, always are negated. And they assume that your character is going to be right-handed, thus their weapon is in their right hand. The shield won't apply to that right-handed flank attack. It does apply to the front or the left. So you do have to keep, or the DM really needs to keep into account positioning and where everybody is within a melee to handle that properly. And that's where visuals are very helpful. If you use a virtual tabletop, that makes it simple, very, very easy. Or the traditional way, and another fun way, is using miniatures, and you space them out on a tabletop, or maybe you have a tabletop map. Some people even, I'm sure you might have seen, they'll bury a large screen TV into a tabletop, make it flush with the tabletop, and then hook it up to a computer, and they have a virtual map right there on their physical tabletop that they put their miniatures on. That's kind of the best of both worlds, where you can have that virtual map and design, it's great for designing it, and it's flexible and extendable and all of that, but you also get to play in person at a table with your minis that you can paint and trade and collect and all that. A lot of fun. I've actually not done it, seen it done. Looks like a lot of fun, I should say. But so that is basically, I guess, armor in a nutshell, as far as first edition is considered, that I wanted to discuss with you all here today. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to throw at you related to armor. You do, of course, when it comes to armor class, need to consider dexterity adjustments. My characters, I love, particularly the fighter types. Fighters, I believe their primary ability is usually considered, it's always strength and then constitution. But I actually like strength and dexterity. With constitution, you have health, and so you can take or absorb more damage. But with dexterity, You just, the strategy there or the tactic is don't get hit. So if you've got heavy armor and you've got a shield and you've got dex adjustments, God forbid you start tacking on some magic, you could be a serious tank, very, very difficult to hit. It really won't matter what kind of hit points you got if you've got really good armor class. Shouldn't say it won't matter, but matters a lot less, right? There's spells and something can penetrate that armor class and so forth. But so yeah, be cognizant of magical items or dexterity adjustments when calculating your armor. Now, one thing that I'm going to do here is plug, of course, AD&D Toolkit. And the reason for that is going back to this. Oh, where's that table I was at? I skipped past it. I'm looking for that bulkiness. I think it might be page 69. When you're considering armors, 65 maybe? Oh, of course, now I can't find it. But if you recall that table I had for armors where it listed their weight and their bulkiness and the base movement and so forth. So that's a big deal to me in my playing. It was for my players too, and I'm just going to keep scrolling through here. You know what? We're going to do this right. I'm going to go to the... We're going to find the actual page number here. All right, so equipment. Taking longer than I really should. Well, this is what I'm looking for. Well, that wasn't in the 60s like I thought. All right, so this is the table I was talking about earlier. We have the visual here. But so this is a big deal, and I like the fact that weight and movement are something you need to consider when choosing your armor. Otherwise, everybody's going to go for plate mail as soon as they can afford it, right? Get the best armor class. So I really like this. And this, the fact that you have a variety of factors to consider, I like that for weapons as well. I like that for gear, because if you have too much gear, you get too heavy. That's less loot you can bring back. It's also going to reduce your movement speed, and therefore if you've got to sprint and avoid combat, hard to do. So weight is a huge factor as far as I'm concerned, and this bulkiness, and I like to account for that. But trying to calculate a character's weight, or think about a party of characters, every time they pick up something they got to add weight, and every time they drop something they got to reduce the weight, and then there's the bulkiness and the base movement rates of armor and all that kind of stuff. It becomes unbearable to do pencil and paper. And so most DMs, either they just ignore a lot of it, or they just do a quick hand wave rule where they have some very general, couple of general rules, and that's it. Like, you know, I'm going to eyeball it if I think you're carrying too much coin, but that's it. And it takes away a big part of the game. So that was the first impetus for me to create Toolkit. I did it for a family game I've been running for a couple of years now. And we wanted to incorporate encumbrance and weight in our game, the way it was done in the book. And so Toolkit was very rudimentary and simple then. It just handled items and weight. And so my characters could add items like you see here. I had just a database of the items, and they could quickly click which ones they wanted to add. And then all of those bulkiness and weight values and the base movement of armor was all considered by Toolkit. It came up with the encumbrance. And then it also calculated the consequent movement rate for that character. And we loved it, because all they had to do is quickly plug in by clicking the buttons of what items they wanted, and then their movement was calculated. And if they pick up a sword, they just click one button to pick up the sword, and their encumbrance and movement adjusts. And I love that. I think even if that's all Toolkit did, I would say use it. I did, right? So proof is in my pudding. It's fantastic. It opens up so many things in your gaming. And really, if you talk to a lot of the old dudes, the grognards who love first edition and second edition and who still play it, that's one of the things they use to describe AD&D. When somebody from 5th edition or 3.5 asks them, what's AD&D about? What's so different about it? They'll say it's more deadly, brutal. One of the next things that comes out of their mouth is there's a lot more resource management. They also talk about the RP value, role-playing and whatnot. You're role-playing a party versus a character and so forth. But resource management is such a big deal in AD&D. And I would say the most fundamental part of resource management is handling your weight. Because whether you're talking about the food and water that you need so you don't dehydrate or starve, or the type of gear you're carrying, or the weapon choice, the armor choice or weapon choice you're going to make, all of it also takes into an account your encumbrance, which then affects your movement, which is your survivability. You need to be able to move and move quickly at times to survive. So, yeah, there's my big plug for Toolkit. If nothing else, it automatically handles your character's encumbrance and movement. It even, if I show you quickly here, if we go to the campaign manager for the DM, it'll even, like if the party's walking around with say a draft horse and a cart, they can load up that cart in Toolkit, and it keeps track of the encumbrance or the weight value of the cart, so it determines the party's movement rate. In addition to their weight, and the party can only move as quickly as the slowest character. That includes the cart. So one of these characters or the cart is moving at a rate of 60. And so it shows you here. And again, I just love that about Toolkit. But there's just so many other things it does, as you can see here with all of these modules and tools. But yeah, handles weight and base movement. These base movements for first edition are calculated in Toolkit automatically. All right, so that being first edition and my Toolkit plug, we're going to move on to second edition. I'm not as well versed with second edition, but I think I got a pretty good handle on it by rote memory, so we'll go through it, but I'll give you page numbers. You can double check me. So second edition handbook here, Player's Handbook. This first table, page 69, is going to show you the different types of armor, their weight, and their cost. So second edition does not have that base movement rate based upon bulkiness like first edition does. They just have a weight value for everything. And where first edition used the pound sign, which is a slightly more abstract concept in first edition, here in second edition, it's literally just weight in like American pounds. And so every item in the game has a weight, and you'll see even like these weapons have their weight in pounds. Armor has a weight in pounds. And we'll get to that momentarily, so just bear that in mind. You can find the prices here. These are standard, say, shop prices. You can vary these, as the DM. That's like a book value. And then there's your weight. All right, you have to forward to, I think, page 75. Will show us, maybe too far. Oh yeah, here we go. This table is the actual armor class ratings for all of your armor. And this has changed a little bit. Like I said, they did add a couple of armors here, which are pretty cool. I like that. I'm trying to find, Brigandine, yeah. So Brigandine armor, really like that. Actually, in Unearthed Arcana, I should point out too, they also have a couple of armors added. And that was just triggered for me because Brigandine, that type of armor, is in Unearthed Arcana for first edition, and I like it. In first edition, you have plate mail, and it was again in UA where they introduced, I know they have field plate, pretty sure they also have full plate there, but they are here in second edition as well, and they can reduce your armor. So in first edition, plate mail and a shield get you down to armor class 2. Does the same thing here. Plate mail plus a shield gets you to 2, but you can get down even further with just standard armor and shields with field plate and full plate. Very expensive though. If we go back to those pricing tables on 69, you'll see here field plate 2,000, full plate 4 to 10,000. And these are decorative custom armors, custom fit. So someone wearing full plate could not just so easily trade it off and let someone else wear it. It's built to fit that body. And again, these full plate for this price is highly decorative. So, usually royalty, I guess, are going to be wearing those, or a very experienced and rich adventurer. All right, but so those were our armor class ratings. They have descriptions of each as far as what they look like, how they're constructed, and so forth, which is pretty cool and helpful for the DM and the players to get an idea of how they are built and work. Shields are pretty similar, though there are some other shields. You'll see like they have a buckler here in 2nd edition. I want to get to those, okay, the encumbrance table. So if you remember, every item I showed you, like the weapons and the armors, each have a weight to it measured in American pounds. LD, right? It's American pound. And so encumbrance works a little bit differently here in 2nd edition. And what they do is, so this is the character strength. You need to know that. And then you need to know the total pounds of equipment they're carrying. So their armor, their weapon, and then whatever gear they're carrying. Total that up. And let's say a character at 10 strength is carrying 79 pounds. He's going to fall into this category of heavy encumbrance. Now, this is an optional rule, and it's optional because, again, very difficult to manage. Not such a difficult concept to understand, but very difficult to actually manifest within gameplay. So it's optional. I don't play 2nd edition. I would imagine most DMs don't do this optional system, again, because it's just so cumbersome. No pun intended. So difficult to manage. But Toolkit makes it easy, and I would like to just point out in Toolkit, you can change your campaign. This is, again, the campaign manager for the Dungeon Master. You can choose the system you're playing. And so if you were to choose 2nd edition and click Update, then you would be working with this encumbrance system as opposed to the one I was talking about earlier for 1st edition. There's also a UA version if you want to include changes that UA makes to 1st edition. So they tally up the overall pounds. They put you into a category. Once you've got your category of encumbrance, it's an encumbrance category, you then have to move down to another table and take your, you modify the movement rate based upon your base movement and the character, again, their strength score. And so that will give you their base movement down here in the meat of the table. So it gets quite tricky. And a lot of, multiple tables you got to reference, a lot of number crunching back and forth every time you're picking things up and dropping them, and you're assuming that you might be getting into a new encumbrance category. It's a pain in the butt. So I would imagine, like I said, most DMs don't do it, but I love it as a concept, so I love Toolkit for that reason, that it does it for us automatically. Numbers are all there. Something else to consider in 2nd edition, I think they talk about this maybe here. Yeah, I think on this page. Yeah, the effects of encumbrance. So encumbrance does affect your movement as you would expect, like it did in 1st edition. They also give it a to-hit penalty if you start getting into higher encumbrance categories from that table on. I think it was 76 encumbrance table. So I kind of do like that. If you're overly encumbered, you're going to slow down your attacks, I suppose, right? So that's how they rationalize it. So it's another little twist that 2E does as opposed to 1E. I don't know if this is considered optional or not, but I like it. I'm not sure if I would use it, but it's interesting. Definitely, like I said, another twist. And so it's something you can consider for your 2E or even 1E games, because again, 1E is very extendable and expandable, and you can customize it any way you like. So if you like this to hit penalty for higher encumbrance, you can use the 2E encumbrance rules and play it. So I hope that video was helpful, that it'll give you some ideas on armor choices and the different factors to consider when selecting your armor. See you again at the next video.